So let's make a start. A very good morning, everybody. Welcome to this morning's FinTech North webinar in partnership with Netpremacy. My name's Julian Wells. I'm director of FinTech North. I'm director of Whitecap Consulting. We're one of the partners in FinTech North. This morning we're going to be talking about how machine learning and smart analytics are helping FinTechs understand their data. This is a follow-on webinar from the first session that we had with Netpremacy recently, where we also had Google speaking as we do today. That was a really popular session, so we're really pleased to be doing a follow-up today. Alistair, if you can move my slides on, that would be great. Just to say, most people are doing this anyway, but if you can make sure mute is on and that you've got your video turned off, that would be great. We're using Google Meet for the session today, so it does mean that you're all in control of your own video and microphones. We are recording the session. We'll send that round afterwards, and if you do have any questions that you want to ask today, then you can copy the link at the top of the slide and you'll be able to post them. Okay, next slide, Alistair. In terms of an agenda, I'm going to do a brief introduction. I'm going to hand over to Alistair at Netpremacy. We're then going to hear from Tom at Netpremacy, and then from Jyrki from Google Cloud. And there'll be a bit of time left at the end when we'll have a panel discussion, and we'll answer any questions that have come in from the audience on the way through. Thanks, Alistair. I know looking at the list, there's quite a few people today that have been to FinTech North events before, but there's also a lot of names I don't recognize. So let me give you a little bit of an introduction as to who we are and what we do. FinTech North is basically a community for the people interested in FinTech in the north of England. In normal times, we host events, seminars, conferences, and they take place in Leeds, Newcastle, Manchester, Liverpool, any number of, like, Harrogate, other locations across the north. And what we always try and do is put on sessions that have interesting topics and interesting speakers, and enable people to learn something about what's going on in FinTech, but also to network with like-minded people. Recently, we've been doing webinars, and we've now done, since 2016, we've done a total of 57 events, and we've had a real wide range of speakers and organizations involved in those. If there's anyone listening today who wants to get involved in future FinTech North events, then please get in touch with us via the website. Okay, next slide, Alistair. So onto this morning and the agenda. So I'm going to introduce Alistair. Once I do that, we'll hear from Tom Anderson from Netpremacy, and then we've got Jyrki from Google, who's going to give us a presentation. So Tom and Jyrki are going to give presentations. Alistair's going to give an introduction to Netpremacy. Then we'll have the panel side of things. Next slide, Alistair. Anybody who's on social media, if you want to tweet anything around the session, then you can use these hashtags. And if you want to tag FinTech North and Netpremacy, we'll be more than happy to sort of amplify what you're saying. Okay, so that's the introduction. Alistair, thanks for partnering with us again. It's great working with you guys, and maybe you could tell us all a little bit about Netpremacy before we start.
Perfect. Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks for that, Julian, as well, and morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. So just to introduce myself, so I'm Alistair Lumley. I'm one of the account executives here at Netpremacy. My role is kind of connecting people to the right people at Netpremacy, but I've also got a special interest in FinTech and do a lot of work in that space. Just to kind of introduce Netpremacy, for those kind of eagle-eyed viewers of you based in the north, you can probably see we're based in the centre of Leeds, so at 6 Wellington Place. We like to say we've got more Google than Google offices. So hopefully when we can invite everyone in and we can run an event there. But I've kind of put this slide up because it backs up a lot of what we do at Netpremacy, and one of the big things around Netpremacy is kind of connecting networks and connecting innovation. We are a partner with Google, and one of the big things and reasons behind today's webinar is really bringing Google into the north and actually connecting them into our network and connecting them into the likes of FinTech North. A little bit about Netpremacy as a company. So we've been a Google Premier Partner for over a decade. So we've worked with the guys for a very, very long time. We specialize in a number of areas of Google sort of solutions, but really our main role is making sure everyone gets the most out of it. They get the right technical expertise that really optimize their usage of Google. And this kind of spans from everything from Google Chrome through to G Suite, for example, which we actually got named as Global Premier Partner of the Year for Work Transformation Enterprise. Basically, that's a little bit of a selfless plug, naming us as the best G Suite house in the world, really. So we're very, very proud of that. But what that does is it cements our knowledge, but is a testament to the work that the guys at Netpremacy do on Google solutions. But this also goes all the way through to sort of Google Cloud Platform, which is the basis of today's webinar. And a big thing about Netpremacy is this idea of partnership. And it's something we're very, very proud of. We've got very deep partnerships within Google, but also in a wider network. So the likes of Julian and the guys at FinTech North. And it's backed up and forms the basis of all of the webinars we do. And a big point behind today is connecting our partners and really bringing everyone sort of into the frame together, connecting Google up into the north, into an area they might not have the biggest presence, and giving people that sort of inside look into Google. But it doesn't just span from our sort of technical relationships and partnerships and our partnerships with FinTech North. It's also sort of deeply rooted within our customer base as well, and the types of people we work with. So we're very, very proud of the partnerships we have on a wider scale in our customer base, really understanding them as an organization and tailoring the right Google solution to what they're trying to do. So we work with some of the most innovative companies such as Ocado, Just Eat, Deliveroo, and more relevant to today, and a use case we'll actually tick off later on, is Monzo as well. So one of the big leaders in the fintech space. And this is something we love to be involved in. We love to be involved in innovative spaces, innovative projects, and that really is what Google is all about, is using technology to actually solve things in an innovative way. And that's really what today is about, is understanding how can we be innovative, and focusing on a core topic, and one that I think is a very hot topic at the moment, is this idea of data. And today is all about data. So how can we use data? How are people using data? How do we actually start on journeys around sort of data, machine learning, smart analytics? And we kind of wanted to answer one question at the very, very start of this, which is, why is data so important to fintechs? Why have all of you booked onto this webinar today? Why is the phrase data, smart analytics, machine learning such a hot topic in the fintech space? And we feel it kind of boils down to 4 key points really here, and 4 key areas. And the first one is all around using data to build a customer profile. So as a business, we've got a lot of customers, we've attracted a lot of customers, we're trying to retain a lot of customers. How do we use data to actually build that customer profile, really understand why they've chosen our solution, why they've chosen our product, what they want to see from it next, what they're using the most? And I think if we took Monzo as an example, they're probably not the biggest from a marketing perspective. They don't do a huge amount of outbound marketing, but what they did do was produce a very well-known and very recognizable card. But actually their product offering, from understanding that customer base, using their data, providing a great service from understanding that customer profile, and actually retained a lot of customers, attracted them and retained them. And I think that's the key to building this customer profile, is it's enabling us to really understand them and actually tailor our solution based on that knowledge. The second point is this idea of helping us be more secure. We can use data in a very, very clever way, and Tom will kind of go over this, and so will Yerky, but we can really understand the data and actually understand how it can make us more secure as a fintech and as a business. So can we start predicting fraudulent activity? Can we start understanding potential flags that make us aware of unsecure behavior, and actually start reacting to those and being a bit more proactive? So it's using data in that sense. I think another great one in the fintech space is all around improving our risk assessment as a fintech. So maybe we're a lender in the fintech space, or maybe we're offering different types of products, but really understanding that customer, if there is a level of risk of taking them on board, how do we react to that? Do we point them on a different journey? Do we use the data in that way to actually recommend an alternative product? And I think if we take all of those 3 sort of points into account, what it boils down to is, as a fintech, as a actual provider, is providing that unbeatable customer service. And I think that is the power of data, and hopefully what will come across today is we've taken all of those areas into account and are actually providing an unbeatable customer service as an organization, as a company, and really maintaining that customer base and growing ourselves as an organization. So that's kind of what the theory is behind today. That is the purpose behind today's webinar, is to start understanding how do we start utilizing this data? How do we actually start the journey, and give a bit of insight to some practical examples. I'll be quiet now and hand over to Tom, who's going to kind of walk you through the startings of this journey, and then we'll hand over to Yerky. But hopefully everyone enjoys the webinar and sort of look forward to showing you guys the content today. So over to you, Tom.
Awesome. If we could move forward. So good morning, everyone. Tom Anderson from Netpremacy here. So I'm one of the technical consultants. So my role is really to try and understand where the business problems can be overlaid with, in my case, Google technologies, to try and help just speed up some of the things that organizations are trying to do today. And I want to start off by actually trying to define what smart analytics actually means, right? Lots of people hear the term, they maybe don't truly know, what exactly it means to them. And actually the truth is that I also don't have a really nice succinct definition. But I think actually if we pop onto the next slide, we can start with what Google has, right? On their page for smart analytics. If you search for Google Cloud Smart Analytics, you'll get a page that says, unlock your data, reimagine your business. Now, as a definition, it's intriguing to say the least. And I'm not actually that good at making things sound as exciting. So my go-to definition wasn't quite as catchy. So Alistair, if we just click on here, my definition is this. There we go. It's to use data intelligently to understand and influence business operations, right? Not quite as catchy, but we're getting a bit closer. How do we actually use data intelligently, though? I think we need to be a little bit more specific. So if we move on to the next slide, what we can actually do is we can actually use Gartner. They may be able to help us define it better with their what we call their analytical ascendancy model, or a maturity model for data analytics. Now, if we describe smart analytics as being able to do the more advanced stages of this maturity model, so looking at that predictive and prescriptive side of things, it starts to make a bit more sense. Now, as an organization gains more and more capabilities in analytics, we could describe them as being able to use data more and more intelligently to influence their operations, right? So they can unlock more of their data to reimagine more of their business. So actually, let's stick with this and let's try and dive into the definitions of the different types of analytics, and we can hopefully try and make a little bit more sense of it. So let's start with descriptive analytics. So at the bottom left here, this is actually being able to understand from a particular data source what has happened, right? It's that keyword what. If you can get data out of a source system and into some sort of readable format, you can do descriptive analytics, right? So imagine in the case of building a customer profile, right? We can get information about that customer, maybe the name, the details of who they are as a person, the product that they're asking for, and we can start to build an idea of who that person is, what that person is, and what they're trying to do, right? So we can actually go look back and we can say, this is what's happening. That's what we call descriptive analytics. And a lot of organizations are really capable in this space, right? They know what's going on in their systems and they can do stuff with that data. Then we move into diagnostic analytics. And this is where you actually take maybe one data source, maybe multiple data sources, and you start to combine them together to try and understand why something's happened, right? And this is the foundation of things like data warehouses. It's about collecting and combining and then visualizing and analyzing all of that different data to try and work out what factors contributed to the outputs that you're seeing, right? So in the case of that customer profile, can we augment the information that we know about them directly with information such as their credit score, for example, the previous products that they purchased from us, and the demographics of that particular, user, customer, whatever it is? Can we use that information to try and understand why that customer is going along that journey today? Why are they looking at this product? And start to ask those questions of why. Now, both descriptive and diagnostic analytics, they work with historical data, right? They work with stuff that's happened in the past and data that can tell you about things after they've happened. But there's a really big step up in the capability of an organization as we move into predictive and prescriptive analytics. So these actually relate to being able to move forwards with time and actually try and look into the future and forecast what could happen, right? Based on parameters that we've got at the moment, what could happen? So predictive analytics, that's where we start to use, mathematical and machine learning capabilities to start looking into the future. We start modeling the data and given, previous events and parameters that we don't change, what could happen, right? With an associated uncertainty, what could happen? And it's actually where we can start to leverage all of the technologies that people are talking about in the industry today. So machine learning and AI models and things like that, that we're actually trying to get to say that we implement smart analytics. Is it a good thing to be looking at? You know, is it something that based on this particular customer profile, this is a product that we think is going to be successful? Or actually based on the information that we know about that particular journey and maybe the history of that person, is this a fraudulent journey? You know, can we predict forward that actually this is not the right type of journey to be doing? Is this something that should be stopped and we should actually have some sort of impact to this? And then we get to sort of the holy grail of analytics, right? And that's prescriptive analytics. And this is where we actually start to really understand the models and the factors and the parameters affecting our data. This is where we can actually start to say, right, well, given that we know these particular parameters about our data models, can we start to simulate different outcomes? Can we start to modify things to try and get to an outcome that we want? Can we actually try and achieve a specific goal by predicting and changing behaviors in the model that we use on our data? So in the case of that customer profile, we could actually say, based on all of the different products and services that we offer and based about all the information we know about our customers, what products could we offer to this particular customer that would be really useful to them? What do we know for a fact that actually this is going to be really useful to them, and this is something that's going to be a good fit for that particular person? Or even go even more holistically, right? So we've got lots of information about customers that have bought our products or are looking at services that we offer. And actually, can we use some of that data to predict what services customers are going to be finding useful? What's going to be something that's going to be useful for us to invest our time and development effort into in order to actually serve our customer and client base? So if we think of smart analytics as being able to do those more advanced types of analytics, it's really good to actually start to understand what we're able to do. But we need to actually start to look inwards and actually say, well, how do we measure ourselves against this maturity model, right? How do we measure our internal capabilities in the data analytics space? And Alistair, if you move on to the next slide, this is where I actually propose that there's three key layers to data analytics in an organization, right? So there is a data acquisition layer. This is really where it all starts. This is about collecting and storing that data. Can't analyze something if you haven't got it. So there's some components in there that obviously need to exist that are responsible for collecting and storing that data for use further down the line. Now, these components are generally technical in nature. So they're generally, databases, ETL pipeline software, data warehouses. They're generally technical components that we put in place that need some sort of digital infrastructure behind them and some sort of interface to actually get that information in and out. And then we move on to what we call the data science layer. So this is actually where we start to understand the data itself and actually what it's trying to tell us. So this is where the field of data science helps, right? So combining statistics, analytics, visualization, combining those with the technical tools available to us, that's where we can start to gain insight from the data that we've collected through that acquisition layer. And in short, we kind of decide to start to understand what that data means and what it can tell us. And this is where a lot of the buzzwords and the technologies that people want to be using, like AI, like ML, like these big data space products and things like that, that's where people actually want to be sitting, and that's where these particular products sit. And then we've got the final layer, and this is arguably the most important layer, and this is doing something with the data. This is the business layer. If you have a lot of insight about data, you've gathered a lot of data, you've got a bit of insight from it, it's no good if you don't actually do anything with it. If you've not got really strong feedback loops within the organization, strongly founded within the senior management team to actually say, hey, we're going to take the outputs of these data analytics and we're going to actually do something to influence what we're doing in the business, then everything you've done in the previous two layers is almost going to be for naught. You need to actually have that really strong feedback loop and actually try and use that data effectively in order to either generate more revenue or mitigate losses, or actually just make sure that you're abiding to the services that you're trying to offer, right? If you need to be able to detect those fraudulent purchases, those fraudulent journeys, that's something that you need to use all three layers effectively for in order to actually implement successfully. So you can develop these individual layers, independently, but actually it's really important to think about all three layers together. But actually, how does something like the Google Cloud Platform help us, right? So for those of you who don't know, so GCP or Google Cloud Platform, I like to describe it as a collection of Google-developed products and services that run on the same infrastructure that Google's built to operate its hugely popular consumer services. So things like Google Search, G Suite, YouTube, all of these services run on the Google infrastructure. And there's a vast number of products that Google's built on top of that in all sorts of different categories, right? We could run a whole nother webinar on what Google Cloud Platform offers. But the key thing to remember is that there's actually a number of them that are really important for data analytics. So Alistair, if we move on to the next slide, you'll see here that we've got 4 pillars of products here in the Google Cloud Platform space on that left-hand side. The first 2 columns, the ingestion and store, these are the products that help us with our data acquisition layer, right? These are our data acquisition capability products, and there's a lot of options here. And that's kind of because there's a wide array of data that we can collect and store, right? So there's different formats that this data comes in. There's different ways of interfacing and interacting with that data. So in turn, there's a lot of different products and a lot of different ways that we can actually interact with that data and collect it. We can use what we call fully managed services to actually minimize that management of the infrastructure and operations of these services. And this is where Google takes care of a lot of those operational elements for us. And actually, that's one of the ways we can increase our capabilities without having to invest huge amounts of time and effort into, for example, physical infrastructure or the teams that manage and operate them. And then we get into the process and analyze and the explore and visualize pillars. And these are the products that help us with our data science capabilities. Now, again, there's a lot of options here because Google's actually very experienced in the data space. And you've got products in there like BigQuery that have been used across enterprises for many, many years. But actually, there's a lot of products in here that are in the artificial intelligence and machine learning space, right? Google's widely considered a leader in a number of these different fields. And there's a lot of products in there that allow you to consume things like pre-built models. So the same models that power things like Google Search and Google Translate, you can actually consume those without having to understand really the data science and the hardcore understanding of how the models work. You can actually just consume them and start to use those types of products and services to just get a bit ahead in that data science capability. And there's actually, we can extend these into what Google calls AutoML. So AutoML is machine learning models that are able to automatically sort of refine, test, and train themselves based on your data sets. So you're actually able to just provide a whole big data set, and Google will do a lot of the hard work, a lot of the hard data science for you without you needing to invest in a whole data science team. So essentially, Google's really well developed in that data space, and there's a lot of really popular products that can help us. And we'll hear a little bit about how some of them are being used a little bit later. But how do we actually, now we've measured ourselves, we know what our internal capabilities are, and we know where that model, that maturity model fits, and we know what those definitions are. How do we start to put them together? So Alistair, if we move on to the next slide, we can start to see that actually if we start building a matrix together, we can see that while we can invest in each layer or component independently, it's really important to actually consider all 3 layers together. So if we take the holy grail of being able to do smart analytics, that means that we're able to do, for example, predictive analytics. Now you can start to see using this matrix that you need to have a bit of significant investment in that data acquisition layer. You need to collect a lot of data, and you need to be able to store and handle a lot of data. And actually, you also need to have some consideration for that data science capability. You need to be able to actually do something in that space with that data. But then most importantly, you also need a business feedback loop, right? You need to do something after you've got that insight, after you've started to do that analytics. Otherwise, you can't successfully implement that smart analytics. So there are things that we need to do as a whole in order to actually achieve smart analytics. But you can invest in each independent layer separately. You can formulate a data strategy that looks at those individual layers. And actually, the investments in those layers don't need to be large, right? So in that data acquisition layer, if you use things like managed services, so things like Dataflow and things like BigQuery, and in that data science space, if you use some of those more intelligent machine learning tool sets, things like AutoML and those consumable AI models, you can actually start to increase your capabilities in those areas and start to do more and more advanced analytical types without having to, worry about all that underlying infrastructure or hire a whole data science team. You can almost take those shortcuts. So if you make intelligent decisions about that data strategy and carefully select those data tools, you can actually, I posit that any organization can implement smart analytics, right? There's a lot of tools, a lot of products out there that can really, really help you increase those capabilities. It's just about formulating the right strategy and considering the different layers properly. So I've talked a lot about the theory of smart analytics, right? I've talked a lot about how we can try and measure it and how we can try and see what our progression looks like. So I'm going to hand over to Jyrki at Google now, who's going to talk about how some organizations in the fintech space are actually implementing this smart analytics. So Jyrki, over to you, my friend.
Thanks, Tom, and good morning, everyone. It's a great chance for us to get to present to you guys and go over some interesting, amazing case studies that we've done with our fintech customers in the space. So firstly, if we move into the next slide, so I guess everybody is familiar with Monzo, so the perennial powerhouse of UK fintechs. So quite a few people have seen the orange card, so no need to dive into what Monzo is actually doing, but we can jump straight into the use case that we sort of helped with Google products to solve. And I think it's very interesting, and going back into what Tom said. So how do you actually sort of go from the create those feedback loops, etc., within this space? And the use case in Monzo was actually that how they can actually power the product development, user experience, and the different aspects around their products with data and insight. And their key was to create sort of an environment where there's autonomy, granularity, and automation. So those were sort of guiding principles for them. And one key thing here is the amazing number of like 85% of BI queries handled as self-service. So how is this powerful? So first thing, like many times, if you want to actually go into the foresight part of the model that Tom was talking about, so you need to have some talent there and data science side. But if those people are actually using their day-to-day to serve the most basic needs on the hindsight, building dashboards for just doing the day-to-day operation, so that's not really driving value that much. So what we can enable is to build systems like these where a large majority of the organization will have access to the data as a self-service. Monzo, for example, is using tools like BigQuery from the stack that Tom was showing. So BigQuery is their data warehouse. It's also their data processing tool, because it's immensely powerful on going to the data and doing the transformation, etc. That will give you sort of real-time action and capability instead of relying on more traditional ETL patterns where you would rely on nightly runs, etc., to create your data sets, and then next day going back and starting to get some insight there. But the other tool is Looker on the BI analytics side. So with that, they can actually create unified models that all the employees can utilize. So massive tables, massive insight onto the data throughout the product landscape. And with this one, you can actually start really creating these feedback loops. And interesting one is the sort of how they, based on this data that they gather through different products, they actually manage to reduce the amount of support tickets in a fairly short time in 50%. So that's something that really shows up on the bottom line of your business. And obviously, how do you stay agile in this type of environment? How do you actually manage this massive data warehouse? So it doesn't work if you have to spend a lot of time tweaking it, keeping it running, keeping it performant, etc. So that's the thing where Google can actually help. So you don't have to, with BigQuery, you don't have to worry about the heavy lifting and keeping your data warehouse running. Google is doing that for you. So that's the powerful insight within BigQuery. So that gives you the zero ops serverless experience. You will just bring your data in and start developing the insight from it. And obviously, this is just a foundation. Then there's going to be the next layer on AI ML, and that's actually something like Tom already mentioned, Auto ML, and sort of the key thing for us is to trying to lower the barrier on going in that domain. And BigQuery is actually amazing on that too, because you typically data scientists and machine learning engineers are very comfortable with tools like notebooks and Python to build their models from scratch and sort of tweak it out. but that's not majority of your organization. So you want to actually reach a bigger part of the organization. And BigQuery is one of those tools where you can actually, all the people in your organization who have understanding of SQL can start on building a model just by using SQL statements. And it's not just simple models like linear regression or logistic regression. We offer more advanced models like matrix factorization, XGBoost tree models. So these are the kind of tools that are now in the fingertips of people with just SQL knowledge and knowledge about the data and the business problem, instead of relying heavily on customized Python paste models, for example. So that's the insight from Monzo, so that a lot of the organization can have access to data, and you can really drive the product development through that. Then next, if we click into the next slide. So another customer that we're talking about today is GoCardless. Again, a big name on the payment space, and well known in UK and also throughout EMEA. So this is a slightly different angle. So when we go into this case study, so the driving factor was the move to the cloud in general. So the customer was looking to move away from on-premise to cloud. And in these type of scenarios, and especially when you talk about a lot of data-intensive applications, the security and control over your data, that's going to be a key factor. So you can't just, it's very sensitive, regulated data, you can't just jump into cloud easily. You have to know that what you're doing and your data is actually secure. And I think Google Cloud is really driving that front a lot. So different security aspects are very well taken care. We cover a lot of the related audits like ISO and SOC, etc., GDPR. So those are sort of covered by the platform, and that gives you the comfortability to actually put your workloads into cloud. And so in this case study, the key points were the sort of more developer-focused and security-focused. And the developer velocity is definitely a thing within cloud. So imagine the previous example. So with Monzo, massive organization using a single data warehouse, and how do you actually keep that running? So again, building pipelines with GoCardless case. So they're using BigQuery also. They're using tools like PubSub and Dataflow to create the data pipelines that flow into BigQuery. And all of these tools are serverless. So you basically focus on just what's the business logic, what type of transformation you need to do, and you focus on that, and Google will help you run that and scale it in We've got customers who are interested in millions, billions of events through these kind of pipelines, and they're running 24/7 and in an extremely performant way. So that's something that only cloud can offer you. Then finally is the sort of cost savings pay on this one. So typically this way you will end up saving a lot. So the auto-scaling nature of these platforms, so BigQuery, for example, it will automatically transfer the data into cheaper storage tiers when it's not accessed in certain time of day. Or you can create automated tools to move the data out of BigQuery into even cheaper storage classes. So those are mechanisms that are really built into the platform and help you streamline your operations and keep it very lean. Especially at these times, it's very important that you can flexibly scale your operation based on the events happening in the outside world. So that's definitely a key thing. And the last piece on this GoCardless, which is actually quite interesting, is the identity-aware proxy access. So this is something that we, within Google, as an employees, we use this every day. So, and I think it's immensely powerful in the current situation where people are sort of working outside of the safety of your office space and the trusted networks there. So this is something that, again, if you put a lot of data into the cloud, so you want to make sure that it's going to be secure there. So how do you still give access to your employees to actually go and hunt for the insight. So this is one of the tools that Google sort of is preaching to the world, that there's a better way than traditional VPNs, which are not necessarily very performant, hard to set up, etc. And people typically don't have a great end user experience with them. So this is again a tool that can give you really good access and enable your organization to actually drive the business value. So that would be for the case studies. I think next we're going to move to the Q&A, but before we go there, just a shameless plug from Google Cloud point of view. So we're actually going to start next week our global Google Cloud Next conference. So the keynotes are going to start next week. It's free to attend. Just need to go the website and register. And after that, there's going to be weekly sessions with different domains. And there's going to be a lot of interesting content on data and analytics, AI, ML. So I highly recommend to go and sign up for it and see for yourself. Thank you.
Great, many thanks, Jyrki, and big thanks to Tom as well for his presentation, and Alistair for the intro earlier on. I think, reflecting back on what we've been hearing, it's been a fascinating sort of passage to sit and listen to. Quite often when we get feedback from people about FinTech North events, we get requests for case studies during the presentations, but also for some slightly more technical content. And I think that just progressed nicely as Alistair laid out the bit of intro. Tom gave us quite a business orientated view of smart analytics, and then Jyrki's presentation's gone into some good technical stuff on the case studies. So thanks, guys. We have another 20 minutes of the session. We're going to go into some Q&A now. There's a link at the top of the screen. If you want to ask a question that you want to write down, then please write it in there, and it'll pop up so we can see it, and then we can feed it into the discussion. I'm going to kick things off with a few questions from my perspective. Jyrki, maybe I'll start with you. I think one of the things I've taken away from the two webinars that we've done with you guys and Netpremacy has been how accessible some of this stuff is to businesses of all sizes. It's not just for the bigger organizations, albeit the two case studies were really big, well-known FinTechs. For people who are listening who are maybe not experts in the fine details of how Google works, when we're looking at data, which is obviously the key topic today, how does Google protect data? How do you keep it as secure as possible?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. I think the story with Google is really amazing on that one. So obviously this can be a key question when you're adopting to the cloud, and some of the points are already covered with the sort of go-cardless example. And I guess there's a multitude of ways to approaching this one, but I personally look into the sort of the platform security side. So what is Google actually doing when we're building a platform and the tooling? And then the other side is the sort of regulations audit side. So how do we make sure that we actually adhere to those? And from the audit side, obviously I'm not an expert on that, so I just briefly, like typically what we do, we just go with the customer. If we see a new audit that customers need for some reason, we follow that space and we make sure that we adhere to that. So like I said, ISOs, SOX, GDPR, this type of audits, global audits, regional audits. So you can find all the information currently on our website. You can download all the audit reports from there. So we just give it easy access to that and very good visibility on that, what we are sort of going, what the direction we're going there. Then the other one is the platform itself. So there, the Google philosophy is basically trust no one. So security in layers, and it comes down to very nitty-gritty technical things like proprietary hardware, that all the things that go into Google Data Center are actually designed specifically for Google Data Center. They have security chips in them that prevent them booting up even in data center. So if you just would take your average chip and plug that in a Google data center, nothing would happen. So it wouldn't even boot up there, and things like that. And then going into more like the global scale that Google has enabled us to build a network that's completely private. So we can utilize that. And obviously that gives you a multitude of benefits, one being the more secure approach. So you rely less on public internet and less hops that might be someone snooping on traffic. Then basic ones like table stakes in this kind of situation, encryption in rest, encryption in transit, and different ways of handling that encryption. So you can trust in Google managing the keys for you. You can manage your keys yourself, or you can even bring your own keys from on-prem, etc. So these are the things that sort of we do in this space, and I would say that we are definitely pushing the boundary on this one, like constantly evolving, taking the learnings that we get from overall in the space. You can imagine Google as a massive company, so we face a lot of security threats all the time. So they are people trying to crack Google every second. So all these learnings are then passed into our customers through GCP.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. Some questions starting to come in. I'm just going to ask Tom a question, and then we'll get on to some of the audience Q&A. I mean, Tom, in your session, you had that nice way of explaining things to us when you looked at the data acquisition layer, data science layer, and the business layer. There's quite a lot of structure in the way that you spoke through things. So how important is it for people to be clear on what their strategy is in relation to data before they start trying to sort of dive into some of this stuff?
Oh, absolutely vital, right? That's the business layer that we talked about before, right? So it's if you haven't got an understanding of where you'd like your capabilities to get to, and you haven't got a good understanding of what your capabilities are, you can't possibly hope to measure the success of, a data strategy. You need to actually start with that data strategy, start with where am I now, where would I like to get to? And then that's where you can really start to map, that journey across, that journey through those different analytical models. And that's where actually you can really see a lot of the benefit of investing in some of these tools. It really does start with where am I now, where do I want to be? And that comes purely and simply from understanding what your capabilities are internally and what the capabilities of the tools will allow you to get to. So yeah, absolutely vital. You need to have a strategy in order to successfully implement these things. And it needs to be something that's driven from the top down. It needs to be something that, senior management and all key stakeholders are really well aware of. But yeah, an absolutely great question there.
Yeah, and it seems to link to marketing quite a lot. To me, there's a lot of data coming out here. What's the how do you sort of use that data and turn it into knowledge that you can then utilize for marketing purposes? That's all for you, Tom. Sorry,
I entirely missed that question.
No worries. I was following on from your point. If you've got a strategy and and everyone's aligned to that, and you're following it through, a lot of the benefits of data seem to manifest themselves in marketing. How do you use data to sort of turn it into knowledge that you can really use for marketing?
Absolutely. And it goes back to that business feedback loop, right? So if you're getting insights from these data, a lot of the tools that organizations have in their back pocket are things like marketing, right? New products are very difficult to come out with. Marketing campaigns, and actually to use marketing as a function to help drive that business. That's one of those key areas that data analytical capability feeds into. So it is often that marketing is one of the sort of end consumers of the analytics that we produce. But it's like if you knew that running a particular promotion or actually promoting a particular product on the third Thursday in every July was going to yield another 20% revenue, you'd be daft not to do that, right? And that's where it ends up being a loop, right? So you constantly find out from campaigns that you've run in the past what works and what doesn't work, and then that's where you can start to introduce, teams like marketing to that consumer end of those analytical capabilities. If you've got a good foundation, it's making sure that that business feedback loop points to the right team. So it just happens that marketing is one of those common teams that it ends up being in terms of those consumers, but actually it could be any teams, right? So if you've got really agile product development teams that actually can iterate on products and add new features and functions and things like that, they may end up being those end consumers. It's about understanding where that data is going to be useful within the business. And that's something that actually the tools and platform, it's difficult for the tools that things like GCP offers to actually help you in that space, right? Because it's very business specific. You need to have a good understanding of your own business and where the data influences it. So it's a really interesting point there. But yeah, marketing generally end up being the consumers because they're really flexible in what they can do with data.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Right. Let's we'll go into some of the audience questions. We've obviously got a few questions lined up ourselves, but we'll fall back on those. So Maz Ali's asked a question. I think this is one for you, Tom, or maybe you, Alistair. A lot of the data and modeling talent within FinTechs has come from the traditional big banks that are very SaaS heavy for risk modeling and regulatory analytics. How easy has it been for FinTechs to move from that to GCP tools?
Sure, I'll take that one again. So I'm going to assume SaaS here being SaaS analytics rather than SaaS, the software as a service term of the word. So SaaS analytics, yeah. There's a few options for SaaS analytics on Google Cloud, right? So you can either run a version or a way of running SaaS in the cloud, but actually you don't need to move everything to Google Cloud in order to get some of the benefits of Google Cloud, right? So you could use GCP tools and products to augment the information and analytics coming out of SaaS analytics. You could take the analytical results from SaaS analytics, plumb that into Google Cloud, augment it with machine learning, etc., all that good stuff. Or actually you can go the other way around, right? So if actually you've collected and you're doing all of your data acquisition with Google Cloud because it's really easy, SaaS analytics actually has an interface for tools like BigQuery. So you can use SaaS analytics for that process, that visualize, that data science capability, but perhaps your data acquisition layer sits on Google Cloud. So there's a bit of flexibility there. It really goes down to where's that investment already and where's that shortest route to success, as it were. Does it make more sense to move SaaS to where some of the data is and do analytics in Google Cloud? Or does it make sense to put all the data in Google Cloud and then ship it over to SaaS analytics? It's one of those use cases, I think. Talk to us. Let's see what that specific use case is. I've not got any particular examples for customers we've taken that journey through, but I'd love to hear if anyone's got any feedback on using SaaS in GCP or using SaaS with GCP. So if anybody's got any insight on that, I'd love to hear it. Get in touch with us. We'd love to hear what you're doing.
Great, thanks, Tom. I think the sort of the complexity and the amount of thinking involved in some of this is one of the other takeaways from me from these sessions is that there's a lot of generic talk about moving to the cloud, and actually there's a whole load of different lenses and considerations to look at there. Jyrki, let's put one of these questions to you. Someone's asked here if I want to say someone I can. It's NKQ. If I want to use Google to do modeling, how do you advise a novice where to start?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So maybe two things here. Obviously, get connected with your Google account team if you work with a company. So we can help you, give you a ton of resources on the training side. We've got a platform called Quick Labs where you can actually go into an actual, you get free training credits for that, and you can go into an actual environment, but without any risk of messing something up. So that it's going to be an ephemeral environment that you can crack on there and see what happens, and then it just goes away and you can restart it. So that's definitely one thing. If you already have access to Google Cloud tools, that's great. Then I personally would recommend BigQuery to get, because it's very easy to get started. So if you have a data set, you can go into Kaggle, for example, download data set from Kaggle, upload that into BigQuery, and start working on that. See how you do the queries there. See how you can do more advanced things like machine learning. If you're already more seasoned one, then you can just spin up a notebook instance and connect that to your BigQuery and start doing the things you do in notebook to that data source. So these are like different steps. And the key thing is to remember there's a free tier on BigQuery. So if you just want to sign up with your own personal account, you will get $300 worth of credits there. And BigQuery itself has a free tier where you can store 10 gigabytes of data and run a terabyte of queries per month for free. So the barrier is really low, and that's would be the way. BigQuery would be the tool that I would recommend to get started.
Great, thank you. So free to access something that powerful is fantastic. I'm going to combine a question I had with one of the audience questions. So I was quite interested in, it's another one for you, Jyrki, in how you yourselves use AI and machine learning within Google. And Peter Chuck has asked, have you implemented any blockchain tech into your data to further secure users' data? So I don't know if you could combine those two, but maybe answer about AI and ML first.
Yeah, so I can start from the AI ML. So that's obviously an interesting question. And Google being a big company, so very broad range of different use cases there, and it can range from small use cases every day, like smart responses in Gmail. So a lot of people use Gmail, and you might notice that it just pops up some text that you should like use this one, or you start typing something that fills the sentence for you. So small things like that, or Google Assistant. And then it ranges from there to actually us within GCP using very sophisticated models developed by DeepMind, which is part of the Alphabet organization, to actually run our data centers and as clean way as possible. So that's a big goal for us, to be sort of all the operations within Google to be as clean as possible. So then how do you actually achieve that? So you crack on with some machine learning, you predict the weather patterns, and you adjust your data center heating based on those, etc. These kind of things. So absolutely abundance of things where we apply it within the organization. Also, the interesting thing is the ecosystem contribution. So to open source projects like TensorFlow, or the work that we do in fair and ethical AI. So obviously the AI itself is putting a lot of questions out there. So these are something that we are contributing a lot into the community. So you can read about on these in various external sources. So TensorFlow has amazing documentation around that. The fair and ethical AI. So there's a bunch of projects going that you can just go and Google for that. And then an amazing source to get the latest and greatest is actually ai.googleblog.com. So that's where our AI research teams are publishing their latest research. So that's pretty cool. Then on the blockchain question, so I think blockchain comes up now and then, and to my knowledge, we're not using blockchain internally at the moment for the security, and but maybe it changes in the future, etc.
Okay. Tom, let's come to you. There's a question from Steve Brown. Are there any prime use case candidates to use as an entry point to introduce using GCP offerings into a business? Maybe a good one to combine with explaining a bit about your role with helping FinTechs at Netpremacy and how you do that.
Absolutely. So in terms of prime use case candidates, we see an awful lot of customers having challenges with data, right? Either they've got a lot of it and they don't know what to do with it, or they don't know what they've got and they need to try and decipher what they've got. So when we see use cases and candidates like that, it typically starts with collecting that data, right? That data acquisition layer. Let's try and collect and store everything that we can and make it universally accessible, right? So Google actually has a mission statement of organizing the world's data and making it universally accessible. And tools like BigQuery have really unique architectures that really help us in being able to get started with small data. And I don't like to use the term small data because there's no such thing as small data. It's just slightly less big data. All the data is useful. It's just there's probably not as much of it. But that doesn't mean that we can't get started with, simple pipelines. Take an individual data source, take an individual set of systems and information that we can actually collect, and then start to just do some basic analytics on it, right? It doesn't need to start with going all the way through to machine learning and start to do all of this predictive analytics. Actually, just being able to do good descriptive and diagnostic analytics on all of your data is infinitely more valuable to you than not being able to do any analytics at all. So I guess when we talk about use case candidates, it's really about just organizing and collecting data. If your data is in different sources, if you don't really know what you've got, that's where you can really start to leverage a partner like Netpremacy. We can help facilitate those data discovery workshops. We can help try and decipher what a data pipeline would look like on Google Cloud. We can actually introduce you and explain the tools like BigQuery that are completely serverless, that will scale with those data pipelines and with that data collection. We've got a lot of experience in actually just helping organizations just get started with data, right? So not particularly in the fintech space, but one of our key customers, Just Eat, when we started with them, we started off with maybe 100 gigs of data. That's grown to several petabytes now, because they made an early decision to choose to put everything into BigQuery and start to analyze it organically as their internal capabilities grow. And it's that type of sort of conversation, that type of partnership that we really, really strive to have with our customers, right? So it's something that we really want to make sure that we provide in terms of value to our customers, is being able to just enable that type of analytical capabilities, being able to enable organizations to just collect and store whatever data they need. And then we can work on the analytics side of things, right? We can work on skilling up in machine learning. We can work on skilling up in those analytical capabilities and being able to export that data out. So there's a lot of different things that Netpremacy can help you with there. We can start at the very beginning. We can help you define what that data strategy looks like. We can help you understand the tools, or we can actually help you implement them as well, right? So we can actually help you go through and implement these data pipelines if actually it's not something that you've got the internal capability to do. So lots of different things. I would say if there was one thing that I wanted to say, it's talk to us, right? We love to hear about how people are using data. We love to hear about how you want to use data, and we'd love to be able to try and help you get there.
And just to sort of follow up on that, organizations of any size, you're happy to hear from anyone of any size to discuss this kind of thing, yeah?
100%. Like I say, just because we talk about big data doesn't mean it has to be billions and billions of rows of data, right? Yeah. Any data that you gather is going to be valuable. It's just going to get more valuable over time as you get more and more of it. You can start now with a small amount of data, simple pipelines, and actually that can grow into something that's really, really valuable at the core of the business. So it doesn't matter the size of your organization. We're more than happy to have that conversation and start working with you on it, because we think it's really exciting what you can do with it.
Okay, brilliant. Look, thanks, Tom. Well, conscious of the time, we'll look to wrap things up in within a couple of minutes. I'll just say a couple of things, and Alistair, I'll hand to you if you want to close things out at the end. Yeah. So, I mean, we've actually got quite a lot of questions we haven't managed to get to, and clearly there's a topic that's kind of got people interested. So that's great. And those of you that have asked questions that we've not answered, then apologies. But we set it out as an hour session. So I think what we've had is a really, really nice run through of the kind of the business and some slightly more technical aspects of how machine learning and smart analytics can be used in fintech. I think the guys have demonstrated that this is a very accessible subject, and if you were thinking that you need to spend a lot of money on this stuff, that's probably not the case, because some of the tools that Google Cloud are offering are actually free to access and trial. I think the fintech, the FS angle here is always interesting. There were a couple of questions around regulation and compliance, and there's always that extra layer of complexity in regulated industries. And I think we haven't covered that in detail today, but from the case studies you can see that this tech can be applied within a regulated environment. If Monzo and Go Cardless are able to use it, then that's an indication there. Anyone who has asked anything that still wants to have a discussion about it, just get in touch with Alistair and the guys. In fact, that's a good time for me to hand over to you, Alistair. Thanks for co-hosting today with us. And do you want to close the session out for us?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And thanks for kind of hosting it again with us. I think it's been another great session, and we're keen to do more and more of these. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think we might have only just scratched the surface around sort of talking smart analytics data in the finance world. So more than happy to go into them in more depth. I suppose as a closing point for me, I would like to kind of back up what Tom said, which is, look, come talk to us. We love data. We love innovative products. It's all about what we do in Netpremacy. So come talk to us if you've got ideas or you want to go over anything. I'd like to say thanks to Yerky as well for hopping on from Google and running through those case studies. I thought it was great, and it kind of brought an element we strive to bring to these types of sessions, which is that crossover between the business layer and the actual technical and customer layer. So how we get started on these, what they look like, and sort of the tech involved. From an actions point of view, the next steps, we'll obviously send a feedback form around to everyone. Everyone who's attended today as well will give you early access and a sneak peek to a white paper we're doing. So we're actually producing, and Tom, to be fair, is producing a white paper all around smart analytics. So we'll share that around everyone. But also, if there's areas you want to see more from us, more than happy to sort of pick those up, pop it on the feedback form, and we'll create them. Like I said, we're looking at doing more of these. But look, any unanswered questions, get in touch with myself. More than happy to answer them. But hope everyone had enjoyed the session and sort of has a great rest of the day.
Awesome.